In this video, I'll try to focus on points where most of us, or all of us, can agree. I think it's safe to say that Earth's climate is warmer now than it was before the Industrial Revolution. For most of the period since the end of the Great Ice Age, glaciers have been melting. Also, sea levels have been rising relative to land masses. Arguably, tectonic activity has sometimes played a role in this. People disagree, however, on whether we as humans should try to prevent glaciers from melting anymore and to prevent sea levels from rising anymore. For the sake of discussion, let's assume that these goals are possible, desirable, and worth the sacrifice. If global warming is causing glaciers to melt and sea levels to rise, the only way to stop it from continuing to happen is to find a way to make the world colder than it is now. How cold would that be? It would have to be at least as cold as it was during the most recent sustained period in human history that glaciers were not melting and sea levels were not rising. Climate enthusiasts most commonly wax nostalgic for the halcyon era just before the Industrial Revolution. As you can see from near the top of the graph, that would be just prior to the year 1760. The era of what they would call fine weather then was during the Little Ice Age, which lasted from 1330 to 1850, the final year of the Industrial Revolution. The average global temperature during the Little Ice Age, including the Industrial Revolution, was from 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit to 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit. I think we can agree that 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit is a non-starter. Nobody wants it that cold. Let's look at the weather from the latter part of the Little Ice Age and move up a few decades past the end of the Industrial Revolution. We'll look at weather in one specific place, New York City, from 1784 to 1888. I'll try to describe it as visually as I can. From those descriptions, you may be able to extrapolate just what the weather was like in your part of the world. Early in January 1784, America's first commercial voyage to China was scheduled to depart. Unfortunately, the East River was frozen so solid that no ships could leave until February 22nd, some 6 weeks past departure date. Throughout the 19th century, the East River froze over at least once a decade, stalling ships until the ice sufficiently melted. The ice was so solid that many people crossed the river in horse-drawn sleighs. Others walked. The ice was so solid that some people built temporary taverns at midpoint in the river for people to warm up and refresh themselves before continuing the rest of the way across the river. Here I should point out that the Brooklyn Bridge was not open until 1883, the Manhattan Bridge opened in 1901, and the Williamsburg Bridge was opened in 1896. Up until then, people crossed the East River by ferry, except when the East River froze over. In 1856, which was 6 years after the official end of the Little Ice Age and the official end of the Industrial Revolution, the weather was so cold that even the much deeper Hudson River also froze. Not only that, but during the 1850s, the East River froze over 3 times. In 1888, almost 3 decades after the official end of the Little Ice Age, New Yorkers played a baseball game on the ice. with 2 teams and spectators. They wore ice skates and skated past the bases rather than sliding into base, but it was baseball. The average global temperature for 1850, the last year of the Industrial Revolution, the last year of the Little Ice Age, was 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit. The global average temperature for 2023 is 59 degrees Fahrenheit, about 2.3 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. For what it's worth, the period from 1950 to 1980 experienced a cooling trend, averaging 57.0 degrees Fahrenheit for the 3 decades, and glaciers actually expanded. So if we want to halt the melting of glaciers and the rising of sea levels, maybe 57 degrees Fahrenheit is the Goldilocks temperature. Not too hot, not too cold. This brings us back to the inconvenient questions. Is it possible? If so, how is it possible? Like, how are we going to do it? Nobody said how. Is it even desirable? Is it worth the sacrifice necessary to achieve the goal? If so, maybe people from Florida or Ecuador can handle average temperatures 2 degrees lower than it is now. But how will you convince people in New Zealand, Russia, or Canada to sign on to the idea? Many Canadian farmers would like to have 3 growing seasons a year. Maybe Canadians could be happier with 4 hockey seasons. Well, maybe it's worth some thought. If you've been dreaming of a white Christmas, maybe your dream will come true.